Hi, I'm Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul.
Welcome to Better Call Paul's. I know how dumb that was, by the way. We don't know that. But, we had to start with something. I mean, my God, you're looking at the top of Jimi Hendrix's head, so what are you going to expect? This is a new program idea that we've come up with where we actually have two men discussing men's mental health issues, and I think that's a real positive thing. We're going to keep this really casual, but we're not going to ignore the fact that some of the things that we're going to be getting into are really, really deep topics, but we are going to try to include some humor, some levity with this, because that's how you survive some of these problems. And we're going to be discussing some controversial topics like we are tonight with discussing the good side and not so good side of AA and different ideas about alcoholism, where it comes from, and whether or not even that somebody who may be diagnosed as an alcoholic might ever successfully drink. And those are all topics that will get all kinds of people, at least in the field of working with alcoholics, very, very, very stimulated, shall I say. But with that, I want to introduce Paul Beatty, who is the other Paul down under, and say thank you for doing this program together with me. I've really been looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot to talk about here. It's there's a lot of things about addiction and alcoholism that there's an orthodoxy, and some of it's true, some of it's not true, or some of it works, some of it doesn't work. And I think it's interesting to pick these things apart a little bit and look at them critically.
And I will say, I agree with that. I will say there'll be times where Paul and I don't agree on some things. That's okay. It's supposed to be that way because neither one of us are here to decide anything for the whole world. And the other thing is that both of us have a significant professional experience in working with alcoholics and drug addicts. But we say that with a word of caution, because just because you have experience and just the orthodoxy that Paul just mentioned is a big problem. Just because you have experience or credentials does not mean you should necessarily be trusted, and we will be getting into some of that. So with that, we're asking you to take us with a grain of salt and use your critical thinking, which you should always do when listening to anybody. But with that, Paul, what is alcoholism? That's a really, I think, important question. What is this stuff that we call alcoholism? How do we know if somebody who is problem drinking is an alcoholic? Is there a diagnostic tool, or is there some magical book we have somewhere that we can hover over the client's head and it starts glowing green for positive to alcoholism? What's the deal? What's a drunk, my friend?
Well, you started off with a really easy question there. Cheers, Paul. I think one of the main things where you can distinguish an alcoholic as opposed to a social drinker or even a heavy drinker is an alcoholic lacks an off switch. There's no off switch there. And so if you're a person that maybe intends to go out one night and has one drink, or intends to have one drink, but that never happens, one drink always turns into 20 or up to the point of blackout, then you've got a problem. So I think it's the inability to just have one, to switch off.
Okay, let me throw out the first gauntlet then. Let me throw out the first challenge. Is it possible that there are people who have particular periods in their life, say after some sort of a trauma or divorce or job loss or other psychologically traumatic event, that may for a period of time not have an off switch, but might have that off switch restored with the resolution of the emotional crisis?
Yeah, I think it's tricky though. I think it's perfectly possible. It's just a question of knowing if that's the case for you, because if you are an alcoholic, one thing that an alcoholic will do is bullshit themselves and say, well, I've been dry for 2 or 5 years or whatever. I can now drink. And there are some people, if you're a proper alcoholic, that it doesn't matter how long you've been sober for, if you have a drink, you're going to chronically relapse, and within a very short space of time end up back where you started from. But I think it's possible that there will be a contextual addiction. So you're going through something where you have not got the necessary coping skills. You haven't learned about this. It's completely outside your field of experience, like a divorce. I mean, people don't get divorced that often. That can be very harrowing. And so while you're going through that, all these emotions, I don't know how to cope, I'll hit the bang, bang, bang. And when all that's done and dusted, because that environment's no longer there, then it might be possible that someone could go back to controlled drinking. Although I would be very careful in suggesting that to someone myself. I think you're looking at a numbers game, and they say 20% of people with a drinking problem can do controlled drinking, or even 80%, or whatever percent you want to pick. Then if you've had a problem with it in the past, you ask yourself the question, okay, what do I gain from drinking again? What do I gain? And it could be, okay, so I've now magically got the ability that I never had before to have 1 or 2 drinks, get a little buzz, and that's it. That's your best case scenario. The worst case scenario is that you fuck up and you get the answer wrong, and then you're back to square one.
I'm glad you said all those things, and I want to get a couple of minutes in here to address this, because I think it's a critically important area, and that's a valid question. If you are a recovering alcoholic and you're running into a wall in your life and you're saying, well, I don't think this is me anymore, I think I can drink successfully, one of the first questions that I would suggest should be running across your mind is, what's the payoff? I mean, there's a lot of questions before a recovering alcoholic should answer before they decide to try to drink successfully. One is, what's the payoff for this? 2, could there be anything going on in my life that's driving this other than just an identity crisis? Because I agree that part of the motivation for this might be that people do need a clear image of themselves. I think in order to function at their best, the best chance at self-actualization, of really understanding their own identity, is that if they're mislabeled as an alcoholic when they're not, you don't even have to drink to maybe know that is different. You may have to drink to find out, but it is a very serious question for a recovering alcoholic. And I would suggest that they remind themselves that when they showed up that first day to AA, or showed up that first day to treatment, it wasn't because things in life were going well. So it should be a serious question taken under a great deal of scrutiny before deciding. But, and I am going to throw a but in here, I have to. Yeah, I know you knew it was coming. Here's the problem. There is an orthodoxy. There is one in AA. It's a universally free, easily available method to develop social networking with people that are living that life, struggling to stay sober and to maintain sobriety and to live in a happy sobriety. So that's a real positive for it. Part of the negative side on it is that it is a bit cultish, and it is religious, which doesn't work for everybody. But the bigger problem, because I don't have issues with AA does what it does. The bigger problem is in the treatment industry, which is saturated with 12-step based recovering alcoholics and addicts who believe in a total orthodoxy that every person that walks in that door is the biogenetically predisposed hopeless alcoholic who can never drink again. They won't entertain any other ideas. They won't entertain any other method of addressing it, particularly in aftercare, other than 12-step programs. And then we have people coming in to treatment programs. We have a name for them. They're called retreads. And they come in over and over and over and over again, sometimes using up all their family's monies. You know, their parents have mortgaged their home and then lost it. Everybody's lost, paying for one treatment after another for these people. And the counselors are telling them each time that the only way you can get sober is in AA, and they've already been there 7, 8, 9 times and failed. And there are alternatives. There's rational recovery. There's community-based outreach programs. There is religion in churches for people that are religious. There is other resources there. Yet we have an orthodoxy of fundamentalists, what I would call them we have a name called them big book thumpers. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. They call them big book thumpers because they're like Bible thumpers, and they will not listen to reason. They will not listen to research. And these are clinicians, mind you. They won't listen to anything, and they mislabel people, and they force them into a mold of failure in many times. So we've got real issues there, Paul, I think. And even before we ask the question, and I'm going to finish getting to whether a person can actually drink or not, because there's more to say. But before we get there, I think we have to acknowledge that there are fundamental problems in the information that most alcoholics receive, or most alleged alcoholics receive, when they show up seeking assistance. That what they hear is that every person that seeks help for alcoholism, or that refuses help for alcoholism, is an alcoholic because they're in denial. And every person in the door has to fit this one standardized model of approach to treating them. And if that doesn't work for them, it's because they're resistant to it. And there's no other discussion to have, and a lot of shaming gets involved, a lot of shaming. So can I just get some of your thoughts on some of the crowing I just did about problems in those areas?
Yeah, I think what you've touched on there about the whole cultishness, because it's almost an ideology. If it was successful, I'm not saying it doesn't work it does work for some people, but if it was the only way, which is what AA will tell you, they will say this is the only way. If you walk out of our doors, you're going to relapse. This is your only way.
Jails, institutions, and death.
That's right. But at the end of it, the success rate is still only 5%, which is the same as every other sort of treatment seems to hit this level at 5%. And for people who do the retreaders, there's something there's some penny, either there's a penny that's not dropping or it's not working for them, or it could be that it's part of a manipulation by that person to say, look, kind of gets them off the hook for a bit before they can go back and start putting burdens on their family and friends again. But yeah, AA is a place that it talks about God, it prays, it meets in churches, it passes around the plate at the end of it to collect money.
But they insist it's not a religious program.
Yeah, it's and they're asking God to examine you for your flaws and things like that. It's the 12-step methodology. It's an interesting one, because I think like the first step isn't that bad, admitting that you've got a problem, you're powerless. I've forgotten what the other steps are, but then it gets into really murky territory where it's really like getting a fucking whip and saying, look at all the pieces of shit I fucking am and all this, and it's kind of entwining the condition deeply with the person. And I think that's the thing, that's the nut you've got to crack. You've got to allow a person to let go of that destructive behavior. And I'm not sure you do that by saying you're a cunt. Look at all these cunty things you've been doing. It's kind of, look at these things, but this is what you do when you're abusing a substance. Look at these things. It's more like that. It's kind of separating the narrative a bit and getting people to let go of themselves.
I agree with you, and I think one of the bigger problems in that is that people drink for different reasons. I mean, quite possibly it may be that if alcoholism is biogenetically predisposed, which I tend to think that in true alcoholics that it is. I mean, I don't think anybody's proven it. We haven't found a gene for alcoholism, but the at least the circumstantial evidence points to the fact that there is people who are biogenetically predisposed to alcoholism. They will never, those people I don't believe will ever seriously be able to have a one drink and stop. They can, because I've seen people like this abstain for 20 years and one drink and they're right to the bottom of the lake immediately. It is, and it's not just like they, it was like they would never stop drinking. And they go to a place of total deterioration after long periods of abstinence very, very quickly. It's mind-boggling how close they get there. But we also have to consider that some people drink circumstantially. And I just did a video recently on codependency where I talked about the fact that there are a lot of guys out there, at least I tried to lead toward it. I didn't want to go too far with talking about alcoholism in that video. But there are a lot of men out there that have been in abusive relationships for year after year after year, and they drink as a result of it. And they would drink as a result of the emotional, psychological, sexual, all the abuse that they receive, and even financial abuse, and being turned almost literally into work slaves in their own home who are treated like they don't belong there, so they drink to escape. And then sending them into a treatment that tells them, hey, if you want to get better, you got to admit what a dirtbag you are. That makes no sense to me. Can we agree on that, Paul?
Yeah, I think we can. I think as far as the whole genetic nature versus nurture thing, I tend to believe, and it's just the belief, that there might be a genetic factor that means that alcohol has a much more euphoric effect on some people than others. But I think that's it. I don't think there's a gene that actually makes you drink, but I think there might be something in that for some people, a drink is like heroin and it's really, tasty stuff. I think what you're saying there is interesting about if we're separating the issue and you're talking about men that are in abusive relationships. I think the other thing that you have to watch out for there is that sometimes the alcohol label can be put on someone just as a measure of control or abuse. So that, a guy that's as you say, is all intents and purposes a slave or has no freedom. Freedom's so important, but has no freedom. And so alcohol at least curtails for freedom. It's like putting yourself on hold a little bit. And if you're doing that, and you're being told that you're an alcoholic, maybe you are, but maybe you're not as well. I think it goes down to a lot of behaviours that some men have, where doing something that I'm going off on a tangent here, but I'll come back. That
go off on it.
That if you're not, a lot of wives out there, if you're not doing something that is giving all your 100% attention to them, if you're doing something that's diverting that resource of your attention to something else, like video games or watching something on TV or reading a fucking book in bed, then you're addicted. You're addicted to games. You're a child. There's lots of shaming, and I think sometimes the alcoholic label is used as a real shaming tactic on men.
And that's not just in the homes of men with drinking problems. Labels are used in the treatment industry. We were discussing earlier, there's an old joke in the treatment field that if you, regarding group therapy, that if you show up early, you're anxious. If you're right on time, you're compulsive. And if you're late, you're avoidant. So no matter what you do, there's going to be a label on you for how you do it. And this is something that, while it's sort of a joke, even in the field, people in the field joke about this and then don't pause to consider just how serious the implications of that are. Is that if we're going to label every behavior, every action, every drink somebody takes, every time somebody takes a puff of weed or whatever, or plays a video game or looks at pornography as an addiction and immediately sort of stampede all over their identity, then that's a form of abuse. And people in the treatment field need to be careful about doing that.
Yeah, I mean, porno addiction's a great one, isn't it? I mean, I think, okay, someone would be a porn addict if they're sitting at work looking at porn, having a bit of a tug. And so that's when addiction becomes a problem instead of a pattern of behavior. But if you're just watching a bit at home, no, that's not an addiction. It's
Yes.
ridiculous.
If you're choking the chicken in your cubicle, then you might want to look at that.
Oh, red light, better bang one out.
Yeah, there's a red flag for sure. Somebody might have an issue. But yeah, we pathologize a lot of behaviors, particularly in men. It is very quick and easy to say, if a guy gets angry, well, you're being a threat. And of course, then the rest of the time we're telling men you need to express your feelings. And when they do, then we say, shame on you. You shouldn't be feeling that. You should be feeling something else. And you should be thinking about somebody else's problem.
You can only feel that, oh, wow, it's a really nice day. I'm so happy. You can't be pissed off. If you're pissed off, you're abusive, or it's toxic masculinity, or whatever crap people come out with. It's okay to be angry sometimes. That's life. Things when you have injustice, that's the way it is. But when you're talking about drinking in certain situations and dealing with pain, and then when you come out of recovery and then you go into AA, and all you are doing really is sitting with that pain still and talking about that pain with other people, it's not giving you a chance to like build up a core of the person that you want to be, because it's just it's almost like reliving the trauma. I drank because my wife was a bitch, or whatever. It's just reliving it. I wonder if some of AA is because people, I think, get addicted to AA, or they go to meetings for years and years and years, and I think a part of it is just some need to socialize, with people of a similar bent. And so if it's that people are looking for, that needn't be AA. That could be just joining a group that's interested in a similar hobby as you.
And I think that's the value. I mean, that's why I had no hesitation, for instance, for the years that I spent writing and developing and running some programs for young adults. I knew that a lot of those were not alcoholics. They were not drug addicts. They were kids that had abused substances. And I mean, young people, I say kids, I'm talking like 18 to 21, 22. They were young people who had partied too much, had lost out on school. The parents became concerned and they were put into treatment. And of course, the treatment system is wired only to treat addicts. So that's what they became, all in effect. But I was very concerned about that. I thought it was mislabeling a lot of young people. It was failing to understand a lot of the family of origin problems that were going on, that were contributing to that behavior, and a lot of their own personal issues. But I still had no problem referring them during the course of treatment, residential treatment, into AA or NA for meetings, because it helped them develop a social affiliation with people that were struggling with similar problems, but were trying to do it without drugs and alcohol. So at least for a temporary measure, I don't think that was an unhealthy way to go at all, because there was little else available. We didn't have, heavy metal listeners that had formed their groups that were sober outside of AA for them to share an interest with. And it was really important to get them connected into groups that were doing their thing and dealing with those problems, but they just weren't doing drugs and alcohol in the process. So I thought that was worthwhile, and I didn't have a problem referring in that way.
And I think it provides a new environment for people, because just as I think that the part of what an addict has to do is to let go of part of the idea of themselves that they have, addicts also face a lot of pressure from the people around them. If you're talking about codependency, people don't like change. And if someone's changing their behavior or changing their way of life, that's uncomfortable for people around them, even if it's a change for the better. Sometimes people are uncomfortable that my friend is not the person he was. I used to go out and get drunk, and I don't have that friend anymore. So surely you can have just one drink. Go on, you can just, there's a lot of pressure there. for people. So yeah, I think especially in the earlier days, AA does provide some sort of different social setting, or at least opens people to the idea that not all social settings have to be around, like in a pub or around alcohol, because that's largely what society is based on, that we meet, gather in a pub, have a few drinks and get a bit messy.
Yep, and goodness knows there's a lot of people doing that. I'm going to take that as my opportunity, Paul, to talk about why I think it might also be important for some people who have identified as alcoholic and who have been through a few years of sobriety and who begin to challenge that and question it in their own mind, why I think it might be important that some of those people do that. And what sort of the pro side of that is. We've already identified that it is a serious decision to make. On the other hand, I think there is a pro side that is worthy of discussion. One, assumedly, people that have been sober 4 or 5 years know how to do what it takes to acquire and maintain sobriety. There is at least some partial fail-safe there, that if you don't know how to get sober with 5 years of sobriety, then something's wrong with that picture. Two, it is a matter of identity for some people. It is a matter of, okay, I've lived with these beliefs that I've been told for the past 4 or 5 years, that by everybody around me, my friends and people that have come to matter, my AA sponsor and other people that I associate with in that program, have told me over and over again for years that this is who I am, that this is me, this defines me, that being a drunk is who I am, it's my identity, and that there is no escape for me, and that I will forever, to my grave, go there as an alcoholic. Well, what if my personal experience is, you know what? When I went into AA, it was right on the heels of a divorce. It was right on the heels of some serious family dysfunction. And maybe I've become to think that I've learned to cope, that I believe that I can cope with life problems without leaning on AA. And I may not even want to drink. But what if I don't want to identify at my core as an alcoholic? What if I want to find out? These are questions that whether we as helping professionals or not, want people to ask those questions, they're going to ask them in a lot of cases. And the question becomes then, do we take over their lives and tell them, no, you can't think this way? Or is it within the realm of possibility to say, which is, we know is true, if you read The Truth About Addiction and Recovery, you will find, and it's easy to find on Amazon by Stanton Peele, you will know that there are lots of people that have returned to moderated normal drinking after periods of sometimes years of chronic drinking. There are lots of people who quit drinking without Alcoholics Anonymous. As a matter of fact, Peele estimates that the majority of people quit without Alcoholics Anonymous, that the majority of people who drink or use drugs dysfunctionally quit because they went to church over religious reasons, they quit because marriages were failing, they quit because jobs were imperiled, they quit because there were legal problems looming over them, and they actually quit because they matured, which is what some people do, is they mature and they decide, you know what, I don't want to live this way anymore, so they quit. But there's many of those people, and many people who have come out of AA that have returned to normalized drinking. That is not to minimize the seriousness of the decision or to make light of it or to say, hey, I'm not recommending, by the way, that anybody who's an alcoholic go out and have a drink tonight. Far from it. That is not what I'm saying, because I know for a fact the consequences. I know I've seen people with esophageal varices, or it's like varicose veins of the throat, that can rupture and they can drown in their own blood because they got there from alcoholism. I've seen people with distended abdomens from the malnutrition and other complications of it. I've seen people die horrible, miserable deaths from cirrhotic livers because of the effects of alcoholism, the wet brain. I mean, you go on and on and on. Alcohol is a very tiny molecule that gets in every crack and crevice of your body, and it is a deadly chemical when it's abused. So I'm not taking this lightly. But I'm also saying that I've seen people, and that I believe people, and I've seen people struggle with deprogramming, of coming out of AA with guilt. People that succeeded, I have worked with them that succeeded in not drinking alcoholically, that succeeded in moderated drinking, and the deprogramming part of it and getting away from the cultish aspects becomes an issue they have to work on in counseling. And so that is a legitimate thing that needs to be discussed. But boy, if I took that into a modern treatment setting and talked to that, I used to, when I was in the formal treatment setting, I used to keep this on the quiet, because there would have been retribution against me. Seriously, they would have been more reactive to that than they were my crazy ideas about men being human beings. They didn't like that, but they tolerated it most of the time. But with this would have been like, you're out. You're out on your ass. We will persecute you. You will be gone, because you're going to kill people, telling them that some of them might drink again successfully. Am I wrong, Paul?
Yes and no. I'm very wary about the, and again, I don't think that it's impossible for people to do. But I think what you're getting at there is kind of shedding the label, or shedding the guilt, or shedding the term alcoholic, you know, because like AA will say, you know, once you're an alcoholic for the rest of your life, and all the connotations that brings with it, you know. And alcoholic is not a good word, but I think there are other ways to shed that other than testing with having a drink, because I think there are risks in that. And
I agree.
You know, I think from my own personal experience, I mean, people can describe me with whatever label that they want. They can use the word alcoholic if they want. I don't think of myself in terms of alcoholic anymore, but I do think of myself in terms of I'm just a non-drinker. I just don't drink, and so I don't have all of that that disease and fucked up guilt and all that thing. I think it is possible for a person to get to a point where they're not drinking and they're just comfortable with that, and they don't have that thing to test it anymore. Because there's the other thing I see it as is that if a problem drinker, they can do anything they like in their lives, you know, except drink. And there is a chance that if they drink, that's the only thing that they'll do in their lives. Just don't add up taking the risk. I think the thought of just having a drink, there's not enough upside on that, because at the most you're going to get, you know, you're going to be the same as everyone else, get one or two, and you're a bit of a buzz on. Whereas the thing for a drinker was to get obliterated. And you're quite right about the devastating health impacts. You know, I watched, I was with my dad the last 3 months of his life as he died from cirrhosis. And you're right, it's a horrible thing to see someone go through. And when I've seen people that go back to rehab, and like you say, you can see where the body's just given up, and there's fluid retention and jaundice. It's a fucking poison. And so, okay, so how do you I think AA is going down the wrong path in saying that you're basically, there's some part of you that's a diseased fuck that's going to be a dickhead for the rest of your life. I don't think that's true at all. I think that there is whether you, maybe a lot of it could be that someone started drinking at too early an age. You know, take drink alcohol or smoke marijuana before adolescence. That is a lot more long-term damaging effect than if they do it after adolescence. It could be as simple as that, or it could be a time in their life where a divorce or a bad relationship, and it's just unbearable, and they haven't quite got to the point where they can get out of that situation. And drinking allows them to stay in that situation, but be vacant, kind of not be present in the moment. And so when that's finished, then yes, maybe it is possible that they could go back to controlled drinking. But I think I disagree, and I just say, why would you want to? Why would you want to? You know, there is plenty in life that you can do that doesn't involve alcohol. If you can't drink alcohol, try a joint instead. But I think, you know, I think Twitter would go fucking mad with that one, you know. But I just think if you've made the decision to be sober, that's fine. You know, I think that's, you know, my way of thinking is that not drinking a poison is a more natural way to be than drinking a poison. And I don't feel any guilt or anything like that.
Okay, I'm gonna rebut with a couple of points, but I'm gonna say this first, preceding it. I don't find any flaws in your logic about this. I mean, I never talked to somebody that I treated for a drinking problem that didn't have ample evidence right before they got to me that they and alcohol were not the best of friends, and that alcohol did not result in good things in their lives, or whatever their drug of choice was that drove them into treatment. But we do need to point out, I think two things need to be pointed out. Now, I had the pleasure, when I knew I was more or less getting out of the mainstream edge of this field, of attending a convention and a roundtable discussion about the disease concept of alcoholism. And I had the pleasure of shutting down the entire conversation by getting up and saying, we call it a disease concept because we can't legitimately call it a disease. The AMA, the American Medical Association, in 1957, the year of my birth, declared alcoholism was a disease. Pure bullshit. Pure bullshit. All money, all politics. There was no truth to it. Alcoholism has never been proven to be a disease. Diseases are a scientific matter, I'm afraid, and not just a political statement issued by the American Medical Association, who should still retract that. It is unscientific and unscholarly and unsupported. And people might argue that it gives people excuses, and other people say, well, no, it's an advantage because it gives them a model to work with. Well, how about a model that can be tangibly demonstrated is all I'm saying. I don't buy the disease bullshit at all. It's absolute lie.
No, I think the only possible upside of describing it as a disease, I'd say that for a small, well, I don't know, for some people, that might be a useful way of thinking about what they're doing as a way of externalizing it. Like, just so that you, in the same way that you have a flu or you have an infection, you take some antibiotics and the infection's gone and it's done and dusted. But I think in the vast majority of cases, they're not talking about a disease in those kinds of terms. They're talking about, you are diseased. You have this chronic thing in you, this cancer that you will never ever get rid of. It's entwined with you. And I think that's such a fucked up way of looking at it, because if you've got so, you know, some people have like chronic conditions that they manage through medication, and totally outside of addiction. And what that means is if they fuck up on their meds or they don't manage the disease properly, it becomes rampant and it's gone again. And I think when you're talking about addiction or alcoholism as a disease, you're in some way, at some level, giving people a fucking green light to fall off the wagon and say, it's my disease, I can't help it, I'm diseased. And that's, you know, you have to take fucking ownership of your own behavior. You know, I know I'm saying that you know, AA goes a bit too far down the path, picking your own flaws and all that, but you have to be responsible for your actions. You have to recognize when your drugging or drinking is causing you a problem, or people around you, and it's just fucking up your life and people's lives around you. And a disease doesn't do that. I haven't. A number of times I've heard people say that I've got this disease called alcoholism. And it's like, fuck you, you haven't got the like, I'm going off on one Paul here, because it's one of those things that's accepted as fucking fact. And you're right, it's 1957, the AMA did it to just be able, so people could claim treatment on insurance. This has got no basis in science, any science at all. If it was a disease, they would have found something, some liquid, some pill, because you've got chemicals for everything. Fucking lies.
Oh,
Find
well,
something.
they did, Paul. It gave the people in AA the opportunity to hold up the big book and say, yes, it's a disease, and we have the medicine right here in our hands. They're called 12 steps. And that's what ended up with that proposition. And it also gave treatment professionals, and I use that word loosely sometimes, a unfortunate sense of security about their and certitude about their knowledge that does not exist. Look, we're at 5 minutes till. We said we were going to be on a schedule. We're going to have to, folks, we're going to limit these to about 45 minutes apiece. Some people bitch about the length of the programs here, and I don't blame them that they are too long. So we're going to try to keep them carved down. But we were going to spend the last couple of minutes, now that everybody agrees with me and disagrees with the other Paul. We're going to spend the last couple of minutes talking about International Men's Day before we wrap up. And Paul, you got some thoughts on that?
Yeah, like, you know, I'm not a huge social media or Twitter jerk, but I was following it a little bit, and there was a couple of things that came about. One is that I thought it was quite positive. A lot of the messages and some of the things, even in mainstream media, were very, very positive, because, you know, there was coming in under the umbrella of male suicide, and then under picked to bits, well, what is causing the male suicide and all these kinds of things. And I thought it actually did do a lot of good, particularly in the UK, where for the first time they had a parliamentary debate, which was scoffed at by Jesse Williams MP, or Jess Williams, but Phillips, but that she had to, you know, backtrack and give funding towards mental health, which was a great result. On the other hand, though, there is still, and this, you know, whenever someone puts up a tweet saying, why do we need an International Men's Day? Every man is Men's Day. That's exactly why you need an International Men's Day, because there is still this feeling that men have got the run of the park in every way of life. And that is not true. And so what I saw from a lot of feminists was absolute fucking hatred to people, even for saying Happy Men's Day. Happy Men's Day, you know. What's the? I'm struggling to see what the possible offence is in there. Even if you buy, say, if you buy the whole feminist thing that there is a pay gap and all this other kind of bullshit. Let's just you know, park our brains and common sense and say that there is truth in that. Then still, why is there a problem with saying, let's have a day for men to talk about issues that affect men? Why is that such a big deal? And so there's an awful lot of hatred towards it. There was an awful lot of co-opting. Like, let's have Men's Day and let's talk about how men can better treat women. No.
You know, that's my 2 cents worth on the subject. I agree with you. There's some positive things that came out of it. I thought the University of York's behavior was cowardly and absolutely should never have happened. But hopefully by next year, we'll have that corrected. But I did a statement on this on International Men's Day, and I'm going to repeat just one small part of that sentiment here. If you're an IMD coordinator, folks, be prepared to fight. If you want to have your event, I mean, I really appreciated Glenn Poole's measured and reasoned responses, appealing to the compassion of feminists who shut down his event. But of course, Glenn knows very well that these people do not feel compassion, that they are soulless, that they are completely devoid of any compassion whatsoever for men and boys, and they hate the idea of men and boys finding any relief in this world. You're going to have to be prepared to fight if you want to have your event and if you want to keep it, because if they can't shut you down, they will then try to co-opt you and do just what Paul said, which is make it all about he for she and male allies and all other kinds of feminist nonsense. It's already happening, folks. And that when that becomes the routine, of course, we will just have International Men's Day will be the third arm of third wave feminism. And we will be screwed out of that resource. Don't let it happen. I don't have any intention on letting it happen, but I fear, I honestly do, that there are still not enough people involved with IMD who have the fortitude to go forward and to honor the fourth leg of International Men's Day, which is to address the social, legal, psychological, legislative, everything you can think of, all forms of discrimination against men. That's the fourth leg of International Men's Day. And the feminists are trying to kick it out from underneath the table right now, or it's called the fourth pillar. Same thing. They're trying to kick it out from underneath the table, and it will happen if people allow it. You must fight back against this stuff. You must be willing to take them on, and I'll quit preaching with that. And I see that our time is up here. We have done it. We have succeeded. And we will be back. Will we be back next week, Paul?
I think because we're heading into the excitement that is white ribbon season in Australia.
Could that be a possible topic? White ribbon?
Yeah.
For the next, and men as victims in domestic violence, and women as perpetrators, and lie out of Australia to the tune of 2.7 million. That's it. We're going to go into that next week, and we'll be back. Thanks for doing this, Paul. And folks, if you like this, help encourages us. You can just go in there and click like on the video and click sub on the channel. And that's all the reward we're asking for. So thanks for that. And with that, I will say good night. And remember, better call Paul's.